Assalamu alaikum. I'm Amina Haider, lecturer, Institute of Business Studies. I'm here with the course of Business Research Methods. This is lecture number 11, and the topic that we are going to discuss today is types of investigation and extent of researcher interference. We will go through the topics that we are going to cover in our today's session. Research design, we would have a recap of the information that we studied in our previous lecture. We would give it a recap. Types of investigation, casual investigation, correlation investigation, and we would learn about different level of researcher interference in the study, how we are going to control the external factors, and in the end we would summarize the whole topic discussed. So like we said in our previous session, research design is actually needed because it facilitates the smooth sailing of various research operations, thereby making the research as efficient as possible, yielding maximum information with minimum expenditure of effort, time and money. So research design has a significant impact on the reliability of the results obtained. It does act as a firm foundation for the entire research. So before moving into the research, you have to plan certain things in advance. You have to decide which the nature of the research. You have to plan how you are going to investigate your findings, how you are going to collect data, what would be the researcher role during the study. So all these steps are decided in advance. These are actually the elements of research design. So when you before moving into the research, before conducting the research, you have to plan things, you have to design things, you have to see how you are going to reach to the objectives that are the basis of the research study, how you are going to get there. So you have to plan these things in advance. So one of the element of research design is also the type of investigation. This figure would give you a complete detail of all the elements that are necessary to be taken care of in advance before actually conducting the study. So you have to decide on the types of investigation, you have to decide on the extent of researcher interference in the study. The researcher has to decide that in which setting, in which circumstances he is going to conduct the research. He has to decide on the unit of analysis before conducting the actual research. So you have to decide. All these blue entities depicts the elements of research design. So you have to decide on all these elements in advance. Types of investigation includes causal investigation and correlation investigation. Causal investigation. When the research question try to establish a definite cause and effect relationship, the causal investigation is necessary. Under this type of investigation, few factors are identified to establish the relationship. In a more simple word, a casual study is an inquiry to know the cause of one or more problems. So, when the researchers want to determine the cause of one or more problem, he is conducting a causal study. For example, if we say that does smoking cause cancer? So we are establishing a relationship between smoking and cancer. So if a person smokes, it's the effect would be that he can get cancer. So there is a relationship between cancer and smoking. So we are trying to find an entity which is becoming the cause of another. Smoking is becoming the cause for cancer. So when you, like we said, when you make an inquiry to know the cause of the problem, that is where the casual study is that is where the approach used is of casual study. Similarly, another example, does advertisement cause sale? Does increase in advertisement affect sale? So whenever there is an increase or decrease in sale, we have associated it with that of advertisement. Or advertisement is the cause that is bringing an effect, which is sale is either increasing or sale is decreasing. The next one is correlation investigation. In most of the business research, there are multiple factors that influence one another, and the researcher might be asked to identify the crucial factors associated with the problem. This situation needs correlation study to answer the question. So here, like the example we just discussed in the previous for the previous study, we would now discuss it in correlation investigation. Are advertisement and sale related? So here we does not establish a causal connection between one factor and another. We only see if the relationship does exist among the variable investigated. And the next is, are smoking and cancer related? So we are trying to find a relationship between smoking and cancer, or in other words we can say that drinking and chewing tobacco associated with cancer. Are they associated? Are smoking, drinking and chewing tobacco associated with cancer? If yes, which among the three variable is considered to have a more stronger association with it? So we want to say if one or more of these variables are associated, are related, or they have any relationship between them, and which one has the stronger association with each other. So correlation study identify important factors that are associated with the problem. So in other words, it is an inquiry to know the important variable associated with the problem. Such type of studies are correlational study. Now we will discuss the level of researcher interference in the study. The extent of interference by the researcher with the normal flow of work at the workplace has a direct bearing on whether the study is going to be a causal one or is going to be a correlational study. So the type of investigation, the extent of investigation could be minimum, it could be moderate, and it could be excessive interference. We would understand these level of interference with the help of an example. A hospital administrator wants to examine the relationship between the perceived emotional support in the system and the stress experienced by the nursing staff. In other words, she wants to do a correlation study. We are calling it a correlational study because we want to see if the perceived emotional support and the stress, which is another variable, are both of these variables associated, are they related with each other or not. So that's why we are calling it a correlational study. In the context of minimum interference of the researcher, to understand the example, the researcher will collect data from the nurses through a questionnaire to indicate how much emotional support they get in the hospital and to what extent they experience stress. By correlating the two variables, the answer is found. In this case, beyond administering a questionnaire to the nurses, the researcher has not interfered with the normal activities in the hospital. So here we see that, like we just said, that researcher is only administrating a questionnaire that would be given to the nurses, and then he would try to find out that whether there is an association between emotional support that the nurses guess and the stress level. So here the researcher interference in the study is minimum. The next is moderate interference. If the researcher wants to establish a causal connection between the emotional support in the hospital and stress, or wants to demonstrate that if the nurses had emotional support, this indeed would cause them to experience less stress. To test the cause and effect relationship, the researcher will measure the stress currently experienced by the nurses in 3 words. We are calling it a causal study because a causal investigation. And we are saying it a causal investigation because we wanted to see if the emotional support that is given to the nurses has any effect on the stress level of the nurses in the hospital. So for that reason, they have deliberately manipulated the extent of emotional support given to three groups of nurses in three wards for perhaps a week and measure the amount of stress at the end of that period. So here we find that not only does the researcher collect data from nurses on their experience stress at two different points in time, but also manipulated the normal course of events by deliberately changing the amount of emotional support received by nurses in wards while leaving things in two wards. Sorry, by deliberately changing the amount of emotional support received by nurses in two wards while leaving things in the third ward unchanged. Here, the researcher has interfered more than minimum. So, comparing it with the previous example, here the researcher has manipulated things, and that's how he has measured things, measured the variables in the study. So here the interference of the researcher is of moderate nature. Excessive interference. If the researcher feels after conducting the previous experiment that the result may not be valid since the other external factors might have influenced the stress level experienced by the nurses. For example, during that particular experimental week, the nurses in one or more wards may not have experienced high level of stress because there were no serious illness or death in the ward. Hence, the emotional support received might not be related to the level of stress experienced. The researcher wants to make sure that such external factors that might affect the cause and effect relationship are controlled. So the researcher might take three groups of medical students, put them in different rooms, and confront all of them with the same stressful task. For example, he might ask them to describe in detail the surgical procedure in performing surgery on a patient who has not responded to chemotherapy and keep asking them with more and more questions. So, in this example, not only is the support manipulated, but even the setting in which this experiment is conducted is artificial, as the researcher has taken the subject away from their normal environment and he has put them in a total entirely different setting. So here the researcher has intervened maximum with the normal setting, the participant and their duties. This is the reference book for today's lecture. That's it for today. Thank you.
It's local.